The warning ignored. High Commander Rexel adjusted his ceremonial sash for the 100th time, his mandibles twitching with barely contained frustration. He stood in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, a vast circular hall that stretched high into the void above. The dome of the chamber displayed the cosmos in real time, stars blinking against the eternal darkness. It was a breathtaking sight, one that had seen countless species rise and fall. Before him, arranged in hovering pods, sat the ruling members of the Galactic Council, a collection of the most powerful alien species in the known universe. They were draped in regal robes, their expressions ranging from boredom to mild annoyance. These were the so-called architects of interstellar civilization, the self-proclaimed guardians of peace and progress. Yet, Rexel knew the truth. They were blind. A dire warning. "My esteemed council members," Rexel began, forcing a calm into his voice that he did not feel. "I come before you today not as a military officer, but as a historian, a witness to the tides of fate." He let his dark eyes scan the room, searching for any flicker of understanding. He found none. "We stand on the precipice of a cataclysm unlike any we have seen. Humanity is rising." A murmur swept through the chamber. Some of the delegates, especially those from the older empires, scoffed. The Ksseltheri Chancellor, a tall, willowy creature with translucent blue skin, waved a dismissive hand. "You speak of the humans again. Commander Rexel, we have tolerated your obsession for far too long. The humans are nothing, an insignificant race confined to their single sun. Their ambitions are irrelevant." Rexel clenched his fists. That was true once. It is no longer. The council chamber dimmed as he activated a holographic display. Scenes of human history flickered into view, the rise and fall of their empires, the wars that had reshaped their planet, their relentless expansion into the stars. He had studied them for years, fascinated and horrified by their nature, a species unlike any other. "Humanity is different," he continued. "Unlike the great empires that sit in this chamber, they do not accept stagnation. They do not submit. Their history is one of defiance, of constant evolution. We have watched them fight among themselves, tear their world apart, and yet every time, they rise stronger." He gestured, and the display shifted to footage taken from a hidden probe, a human fleet, sleek and menacing, maneuvering through the wreckage of a Ksseltheri outpost. The council members stiffened. "The humans do not build temples to honor their past," Rexel pressed on. "They build weapons to shape their future." A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. The Travaxian ambassador, a creature resembling a living shadow, leaned forward. "What are you suggesting, Commander? That they are a threat?" "I am suggesting," Rexel said carefully, "that they will not remain beneath us for much longer." The Empire's arrogance. The Livethi sovereign, a massive reptilian warlord adorned in golden armor, snorted. "And what would you have us do? Wipe them out preemptively? Such an act would be beneath the honor of this council." "Would it?" Rexel shot back. "How many times have we done so before? How many fledgling species have we crushed beneath our heel before they could challenge us?" He let the words sink in. "The difference is that humanity will not go quietly." He turned back to the hologram, zooming in on Earth. "They are expanding. Their technology is advancing at an alarming rate. They have reverse-engineered our discarded wreckage, adapted faster than any species we have ever encountered." The Ksseltheri Chancellor exhaled sharply. "And yet they remain confined to a handful of systems. For now." The chamber fell into silence. The unstoppable march. Rexel's voice dropped to a near whisper. "You believe them weak because they lack the numbers, the technology, the fleets. But you forget their most dangerous weapon. And what is that? Their will." The display flickered again, showing footage of human soldiers in battle, against one another. World War II. The conflicts that followed. Their endurance, their ferocity. They do not conquer like we do. They do not seek territory for the sake of dominion. When they fight, it is for survival. for vengeance, and when they unite against a common enemy, they do not stop until they have eradicated it. The Trivaxian ambassador shifted uncomfortably. You paint them as monsters. No. Rexel shook his head. I paint them as what they are. Survivors. The fatal mistake. The Ivethi warlord scoffed. Even if what you say is true, they are still nothing before the might of the Council. We control the trade routes, the fuel reserves, the hyperspace gates. If they step out of line, we will simply cut them off. Their so-called defiance will crumble under economic starvation. Rexel sighed. He had expected this arrogance. You assume they need us. You assume they will play by our rules. You assume they will break before they bend. He leaned forward. And that is where you are wrong. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some agreed with him. Others dismissed him outright. The debate raged for hours, but in the end, the decision was made. The Council would do nothing. Humanity was insignificant, they claimed. They had no fleets to challenge the established powers. No weapons that could threaten entire empires. They were wrong. The storm breaks. As Rexel left the chamber, he cast one final look back. He had done all he could. The warning had been given. And now there was nothing left to do but watch as the galaxy learned the hard way. Humanity had been underestimated for too long. And soon, the stars would burn. The first strike. The Galactic Council had made its decision. To do nothing. High Commander Rexel left the chamber feeling the weight of their arrogance pressing down on him like a dying star. He had seen what was coming, had sounded the alarm, and had been ignored. The empires were convinced of their eternal dominion, of their superiority over humanity. But war was coming. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. And when it did, no empire would survive. The gathering storm. Far beyond the Council's reach, on the outer fringes of the galaxy, the first embers of war began to ignite. The colony world of Vera 7, a mining outpost under the control of the Seltheri Empire, was the first to fall. It started with silence. The outpost was a vital cog in the Empire's war machine, producing the rare and volatile Xenphoria ore, a key component in hyperdrive reactors. It was heavily guarded, patrolled by Seltheri warships, its surface crawling with armed enforcers. Yet, one day, without warning, all communications ceased. A fleet was dispatched. They expected a minor rebellion, perhaps a labor uprising. After all, the humans who had been forced to work there had never been compliant. What they found was a graveyard. The orbital defense platforms had been disabled, not destroyed. The guards stationed on the planet had been wiped out, but not by traditional weapons. Their bodies were intact, untouched by plasma fire. Their throats had been slit. It was surgical, precise, and there was no trace of the humans. Not a single worker remained. The fleet sent an urgent distress signal to the Seltheri High Command. Before they could receive a response, their scanners picked up movement, not from the surface, but from within their own ships. The humans had boarded them. The fall of Vera 7. It happened in less than an hour. The Seltheri officers aboard the fleet had always believed in technological superiority. They had shields, they had plasma rifles, they had centuries of experience in war. But the humans did not fight like an empire. They fought like predators. By the time the Seltheri realized they had been infiltrated, it was already too late. The humans moved through the ships like ghosts, appearing in corridors where there were no signs of forced entry, emerging from the ventilation systems, from maintenance tunnels. The Seltheri warriors were used to orderly combat, fleets clashing in space, grand declarations of war, political posturing. The humans gave them none of that. They gave them the darkness. The lights flickered, life support systems failed, gravity controls were hijacked. In some ships, the Seltheri found themselves weightless, helplessly floating as unseen hands dragged them into the void. On other ships, the humans sealed the doors, venting entire sections into space. Some of the Seltheri surrendered. They threw down their weapons, fell to their knees, begged for mercy. The humans gave them none. By the time that Seltheri High Command received the distress signal, it was already a recording. The final transmission played across every frequency in the Empire. A Seltheri officer, kneeling in his own blood, eyes wide with terror. A human figure behind him, face obscured in shadows. The officer's voice trembled. "We were wrong." The human spoke only 2 words before the feed cut to black. "No more." The Council's delusion. The Galactic Council convened in an emergency session. Panic rippled through the chamber. The Seltheri Chancellor was livid, his translucent skin pulsing with waves of dark blue, a sign of rage among his species. They massacred an entire fleet, an entire colony, he bellowed. The Ivethi sovereign folded his massive arms. A single mining colony, hardly the act of a true war. Rexel remained silent, watching, waiting. The Seltheri Chancellor turned toward the Council with desperation in his eyes. "You don't understand. This wasn't a battle. This wasn't an attack. This was a message." A silence fell over the chamber. The Trivaxian ambassador finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "And what do the humans want?" The Seltheri Chancellor swallowed. "Revenge." Rexel exhaled slowly. He had tried to warn them. He had tried to save them. It was too late now. Humanity had declared war, and they would not stop. The silent expansion. The next few months passed in uneasy silence. The Council expected retaliation. They expected a grand assault, fleets clashing in space, a declaration of war. Instead, nothing happened. Trade routes remained operational. Human ships moved through Council-controlled space without incident. There were no raids, no skirmishes, no ultimatums. But something felt wrong. Rexel could feel it. A tension in the air, a quiet hum beneath the surface of the galaxy. It was the calm before the storm. The first empire falls. The silence broke when the Ivethi homeworld, Draxos 9, went dark. No warnings, no distress signals. One moment, the planet was alive, its orbital stations bustling with activity, its trade routes humming with interstellar commerce. The next, nothing. The Council dispatched a massive fleet, the largest in recorded history. Thousands of warships, elite soldiers, entire legions. They never returned. Only one ship made it back, a single damaged warcruiser, its hull blackened and torn as if it had been ripped apart from the inside. The lone survivor, a Ivethi officer, was found curled in the ship's cargo hold, his mind shattered, his eyes filled with a terror that words could not describe. When questioned, he could only repeat one sentence over and over again. "We let them live. We let them live. We let them live." The war begins. The Council finally understood. They had made the same mistake every empire before them had made. They had underestimated humanity. And now, they would pay the price. One by one, the empires would fall. Because humanity did not fight for conquest. They fought for revenge. And they would not stop until every last empire had been wiped from the stars. The war machine awakens. The Galactic Council was in shambles. The Ivethi homeworld had gone dark. The Seltheri Empire had lost an entire colony and a fleet with surgical precision. The ruling empires, once so sure of their dominance, now sat in stunned silence, their minds racing for an explanation, a strategy, a way out. But there was no escape. The Council's last debate. High Commander Rexel stood at the edge of the chamber, watching as the Council descended into chaos. The humans are not fighting for territory. The Trivaxian ambassador shouted, his shadowy form flickering with unease. They are fighting for something else. They are hunting us, the Seltheri Chancellor said, his voice a hollow whisper. We gave them no choice. The Ivethi sovereign slammed his massive clawed fist against his podium, cracking the polished stone. Enough of this cowardice. We are the rulers of this galaxy. We will burn their worlds to ash and There is no war to win. Rexel's voice boomed over the chamber, silencing the bickering fools before him. We have already lost. His words struck like a blade, cutting through the arrogance that still clung to the dying remnants of the great empires. They are not launching armies at us, Rexel continued. They are not fighting by our rules. They are striking from the shadows. They appear, they kill, they disappear, and when we react, they are already gone. He looked around, his gaze hard. You think you still have control. Look around you. How many colonies have gone silent? How many ships have failed to return? You don't even know how much you've already lost. The chamber was deathly silent. Then the emergency signals came in, and the galaxy burned. The fall of the outer rim. The attack was surgical. It started with communication blackouts. At first, just a few border worlds. Then entire trade networks. The Council empires scrambled, sending fleets to investigate. None returned. Stations that had once been bustling with trade and diplomacy were now silent tombs, their corridors haunted by the scent of war and death. Entire supply chains collapsed. Military outposts vanished overnight. The Galactic Council had never faced an enemy like this. They were prepared for war, not annihilation. And humanity was annihilating them. The arrival of the Black Fleet. The first sighting of a human warfleet came 3 weeks later. A Seltheri monitoring station detected something unusual. A formation of unidentified ships moving through the dead zone where Vera 7 had once stood. They were not Council ships. They were human. But these were not the crude, patched-together vessels that had once struggled to leave their own solar system. These ships were silent hunters, their hulls black as the void, designed to absorb radar signals. There were no visible insignias, no glowing banners of allegiance, just shadows, gliding through space with predatory grace. The station attempted to transmit a warning. It was the last message they ever sent. Moments later, the Seltheri homeworld received a transmission from an unknown source. It was a live feed. The station's crew, standing in a row, their hands bound. A figure stepped forward, clad in tactical armor, helmet hiding their face. When they spoke, every empire listened. Humanity speaks. For centuries, we bled while you feasted. The voice was calm, almost inhuman in its restraint. You sent your fleets to our world. You slaughtered us like cattle. You enslaved our people, stole our children, and called it progress. A pause. We let you. For too long, we let you. The figure turned slightly, addressing the unseen masses beyond the screen. No more. A heartbeat later, the Seltheri station detonated, an explosion so precise that only the targeted areas were vaporized, leaving the wreckage drifting like a grave marker in the void. The feed cut to black. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer speaking in whispers. They had declared war. And now the galaxy would burn. The Council's desperation. Panic swept through the ruling empires. Entire fleets were mobilized, entire worlds fortified. Every empire now understood. This was not an uprising. This was eradication. The Ovethi sovereign, his arrogance finally cracking, turned to Rexel with desperation. You knew this was coming, he said. How do we stop them? Rexel's expression was grim. There was no stopping this. You don't, he said. You run. But there was nowhere left to run. The fall of the core worlds. The war spread like wildfire. The once proud capital of the Trivaxian hierarchy was silenced in a single night. No explosions. No grand battle. Just emptiness. The Seltheri Empire collapsed, their own slave worlds rising against them, aided by human operatives who had been planting the seeds of rebellion for years. Entire legions vanished, their warships found floating, their crews missing. The Council finally launched their full might. Thousands of war fleets, billions of soldiers, weapons of unimaginable power. But the enemy was already inside. Humanity had not spent the past decades building empires. They had spent them learning how to kill empires. And now, one by one, the empires crumbled. The last stand. The council gathered for one final meeting. There were only 5 of them left. Once, there had been dozens. Entire civilizations that had ruled for millennia were now nothing but ashes and whispers. The Ivethi sovereign, now little more than a shadow of his former self, turned to Rexel with defeat in his eyes. "What do they want?" he whispered. Rexel closed his eyes. He already knew the answer. It wasn't territory. It wasn't wealth. It was justice. It was vengeance. And there was only one way this would end. With the last empire falling, and humanity standing alone in the void. The final war. The galaxy had never known silence like this before. Once, the void had been alive with trade, diplomacy, and war. Messages had raced across hyperspace lanes, carrying decrees from mighty rulers, orders from admirals, and whispers of rebellion. Now, there was only emptiness. The mighty Galactic Council, which had once ruled the stars without challenge, was now on the brink of extinction. And humanity was the reaper. The last defenses. The few remaining empires had abandoned pride. They had finally accepted that humanity could not be crushed, could not be reasoned with, could not be stopped. The Ivethi, the Teltheri, the Travaxians, and the last remnants of the lesser empires gathered their fleets in a desperate bid to hold the core worlds. They called it the Last Defense. The remnants of 1,000 dying civilizations formed an armada over the fortress world of Dragonus, an impenetrable bastion deep within the core systems. They had billions of soldiers, countless warships. They had built planetary shields that could withstand star-crushing impacts. And they waited. But the enemy did not come in a fleet. There were no grand armadas, no fleets forming ranks before the fortress world. There was only darkness, and in that darkness, humanity moved. The infiltration. The first sign of attack came inside the fortress itself. Entire security sectors went dark. High-ranking officers vanished from their chambers. Airlocks malfunctioned, venting thousands of soldiers into the vacuum of space without a single enemy being seen. Every major command center received the same message. "You let us burn. Now we burn you." Panic set in. The Empire commanders tried to rally their forces, but their own communications were compromised. Orders were twisted. Defense grids turned against them. They still hadn't seen a single human ship. Then, the sabotage detonations began. Entire fleets exploded from within their own hangars, their ammunition depots ignited by operatives who had been inside for years. They had fortified their planet against invasion. But humanity had never planned to invade. They had planned to erase. The scorched sky. When the first human ships appeared, they did not come in waves. They came in shadows. Sleek, void-colored dreadnoughts emerged from slip space, undetected until they were already inside the system. By the time the Planetary Defense Network even registered their presence, it was already too late. The orbital platforms were offline. The defense fleets were in ruins. The High Command was dead. Then the bombardment began. But this was not a planetary siege. This was extermination. The planet burns. The first shockwave of destruction was targeted. Factories, barracks, war production centers. Then came the civilian sectors. The rulers of the galaxy had made one fatal mistake. They had believed for centuries that humanity could be beaten, occupied, controlled. They had never considered that humanity would come for blood. No treaties, no negotiations, no mercy. The capital city of Dragonus, the heart of the last empire, vanished in a column of nuclear fire. Entire mountain ranges were melted into glass. The oceans boiled. And still, humanity did not stop. The final broadcast, as the planet crumbled, a single distress transmission was sent across the surviving empires. A final, desperate plea. It showed the last surviving rulers of the council huddled together in a crumbling war bunker. The Oivethi sovereign, once a warrior of unshakable pride, now trembled like a child. The Travaxian ambassador, once so sure of his people's immortality, whispered in a broken voice, They are not an empire. They are not conquerors. They are something else." The Texeltheri chancellor simply stared into the camera, his once brilliant blue skin drained of all color. He spoke the final words ever heard from the rulers of the old galaxy. "We should have killed them all." The transmission cut to black. A moment later, Dragonus exploded. The death of the council. With the fall of the core worlds, the war was over. But humanity did not stop. One by one, they hunted the remaining survivors of the council. The old rulers hid in the ruins of their fallen empires. But humanity had learned patience. They had spent centuries waiting in the dark. And now, they were the dark. The last surviving Seltheri warlord was found floating in an escape pod, long after his people had perished. A human ship found him, brought him aboard. For 3 days, they said nothing. On the 4th day, a single human officer entered his cell. The Seltheri warlord, broken, bleeding, on the verge of madness, looked up at his captor. And he begged. "We surrender," he whispered. "Please, no more." The human officer tilted his head. There was never an offer for surrender. The warlord began to sob. The officer spoke again, softer this time. "You burned our worlds. You slaughtered our people. You thought we would forget." He leaned closer. "We are not like you." Then, in one swift motion, he silenced the last of the Exeltheri forever. The new rulers of the galaxy. And so, the last of the old empires fell. The galaxy, once ruled by 1,000 mighty civilizations, now belonged to one. Humanity did not take the throne. They burned it. There were no new laws, no new council, no speeches, just silence. The empires that had once ruled for millennia had vanished. Humanity did not celebrate. They had done what was necessary. The galaxy would never forget what had been done to them. And now, they would never forgive. In the void where great civilizations had once stood, humanity remained, watching, waiting, and ensuring that no empire would ever rise again. Because the moment any species thought of ruling the stars, they would remember what happened to the last ones who tried. And they would remember the name of their destroyers. Humanity. The silence after war. The war was over. But the echoes of destruction still rippled through the galaxy. For the first time in recorded history, there was no galactic council, no ruling empire, no civilization powerful enough to enforce order. The stars stood empty, haunted by the ghosts of fallen rulers and shattered fleets. The great empires that had once dictated the fate of countless species had been wiped from existence, and in their place, humanity remained, watching, waiting, deciding. The aftermath of annihilation, where once mighty warfleets had patrolled the hyperlanes, now only derelict husks drifted in the void. Once bustling trade worlds lay in ruins, their megacities reduced to craters of glass and ash. The surviving species, those that had served the old empires, those that had not been targeted for their crimes, were left to scavenge for survival. But the most terrifying thing about this new galaxy was not the destruction. It was the silence. No new rulers emerged. No grand fleets assembled. No species dared to claim dominion over the stars. Because every survivor knew one unshakable truth. The moment any empire tried to rise again, humanity would return. And this time, there would be no survivors. The remnants. The few survivors of the old world had flowed into the darkness, their once proud civilizations reduced to wandering refugee fleets, hiding in the shadows of broken worlds. The Travaxian remnants, once an empire spanning hundreds of systems, were now a dying handful of ships, forever on the run, too afraid to settle, too terrified to rebuild. The Seltheri, once the dominant rulers of 10 core worlds, were now hunted like vermin, their kind despised even by those they once ruled over. The Ivethi, once warriors feared across the galaxy, had been broken beyond recognition. No longer conquerors, no longer proud, they lived as drifters. Their war banners burned, their weapons turned to scrap. Some of these scattered survivors tried to hide from the inevitable. Others tried to bargain for their lives. A few, in their desperation, even dared to fight back. None of them survived. The execution of the last emperor. One final stronghold remained, a hidden fortress, buried deep within the ruins of the last Ivethi war world. Inside, the last emperor of the old galaxy hid in his throne room, guarded by his most loyal warriors, surrounded by ancient relics of his once glorious empire. He had waited for this moment. He knew the humans would come. And when they did, they came not as diplomats, not as conquerors, but as executioners. The last emperor of the Ivethi made his final stand with a blade in hand, his armor gleaming in the flickering light of a dying world. He lasted 7 seconds. His throne, once a symbol of absolute power, was left empty. His empire, once the pride of 1,000 worlds, was now dust. With his death, the last official ruler of the old galaxy was no more. The weight of victory. And yet, even as the final war ended, humanity did not celebrate. There were no parades, no declarations of dominion, no coronations of new rulers. The soldiers who had fought this war, those who had emerged from the darkness, those who had sacrificed everything to avenge their fallen world, did not return home as heroes, because they had no home to return to. Earth had burned long ago, its skies blackened, its lands scarred by the wars of the past. Humanity had risen not from comfort, not from power, but from the ashes of their own near extinction. They had not fought for conquest. They had fought for revenge. And now that revenge was complete. But what was left? What did it mean to be the last one standing? For the first time in history, humanity was alone. The monsters that had once haunted them were dead. The empires that had once enslaved them were gone. And the void stretched before them, empty and endless. The decision. For decades, the surviving species of the galaxy lived in terror, waiting for the inevitable moment when humanity would decide their fate. Would the humans continue their war, wiping out every last alien race, ensuring that no one could ever threaten them again? Would they rebuild, forging a new empire in the ruins of the old world, claiming the galaxy as their own? Or would they simply disappear, fading into legend, leaving the galaxy to fear their return forever? The answer came not in words, not in a declaration, but in actions. Humanity did not take the throne. They did not demand tribute. They did not claim dominion over the stars. Instead, they vanished. The fleets that had once terrorized the ruling empire simply left. The soldiers who had fought the war faded into the void. No human world claimed power. No human leader emerged. They had done what they came to do. And now, they were gone. The legacy of fear, but their absence did not bring peace. It brought fear, because no one knew where they had gone. No one knew if they were watching. No one knew if they would return. But every species, every survivor, knew one thing for certain. If any empire rose again, if any species dared to claim dominion over the stars, if any ruler forgot what had happened to those before them, the silence would break. And when it did, humanity would return. And this time, they would not leave anything behind. The phantom of humanity. The war had ended. The last empires were gone, their fleets reduced to drifting wrecks, their rulers nothing but ashes scattered across the void. And then, humanity vanished. Not a single ship remained in the known galaxy. No planets bore their flag. No colonies flew their banners. No war fleets patrolled their borders. They had done what no species had ever done before. They had erased the old world, wiped it clean, and then disappeared into the darkness. For the first time in thousands of years, The galaxy had no rulers, but it was not free, because the fear of humanity still remained. And in that fear, the galaxy learned a terrible truth. An empire does not need to exist to rule. The new Dark Age. With the old empires gone, chaos should have followed. Warlords should have risen, pirates should have claimed the abandoned systems, and a new ruling species should have taken the throne of galactic dominion. But no one did. No one dared. Trade routes fell silent, abandoned in the aftermath of the war. The core worlds, once the hearts of civilization, remained empty husks, their great cities untouched, because no one had the courage to reclaim them. Entire species lived in hiding, terrified that even the thought of ambition might bring the humans back. The remnants of the Vivethi, now scattered nomads, whispered prayers of fear to the void, hoping that humanity had truly left. The surviving Seltheri, once the most arrogant race in the universe, now huddled in shadowed corners of uncharted space, speaking only in hushed voices, never above a whisper. The Travaxians, once masters of diplomacy and trade, had abandoned their entire economic network, sealing themselves inside their own hollowed-out planets, afraid that even commerce might be seen as a return to empire building. The galaxy had not been liberated. It had been haunted. Every species, every survivor, lived under the same unspoken law. Do not rebuild. Do not unite. Do not rise. Because if they did, the humans would come back. The phantom fleets. At first, they believed that humanity had truly left, that they had done their duty, exacted their revenge, and then disappeared into extinction. Then the whispers started. Fleets sent to reclaim lost colonies never returned. Ships that strayed too far into abandoned human battlefields were found drifting, their crews missing, their cargo untouched. Entire planets, thought to be empty, suddenly went dark when scouting teams arrived. No wreckage was found. No distress signals were sent. Only silence. The survivors named them the Phantom Fleets, human warships that should no longer exist, appearing in the dead of night, striking without warning, leaving nothing behind. No one had ever seen them. No one had ever survived an encounter. But they were there, watching, waiting, reminding the galaxy of a single truth. Humanity was still out there, and they would never let the galaxy forget. The curse of the throne. For 200 years, the galaxy remained in a state of limbo. No civilization rose. No rulers declared themselves the new emperors of the void, until one species tried. The Torveth Dominion, a young race, unshaped by the horrors of the old world, bold enough to think that the warnings were just myths, that the humans had been nothing more than a nightmare from the past. They declared themselves the new rulers of the galaxy. They claimed the abandoned throne of the old council. They sent their war fleets to occupy the ruined capital worlds, eager to claim what had been left behind. For 3 months, they believed they had won. On the 92nd day of their reign, their homeworld vanished. Not destroyed. Vanished. The planet was still there, but its cities, its people, every living thing on its surface, gone. No distress calls. No survivors. Just an empty world, filled with silent ruins, as if the Torveth had never existed. The message was clear. Humanity was still watching. And the moment any species tried to claim dominion over the stars, they would erase them. The question of humanity. Many species, in the centuries that followed, tried to answer the question, where had humanity gone? Some believed they had retreated to the depths of uncharted space, beyond the known galaxy, building something greater in the void. Others believed they had integrated into the shadows, moving unseen, ensuring that no one ever threatened their survival again. A few believed that humanity had never truly existed, that they had been nothing more than a force of nature, a vengeful storm, wiping away the sins of the old galaxy before fading into myth. But one thing remained certain. Whenever a fleet grew too large, whenever a species expanded too far, whenever an emperor whispered dreams of galactic conquest, They would remember. The phantom fleets, the vanished worlds, the silent warnings. And they would know. Humanity was still out there, and they were always watching. The Final Testament. 1,000 years later, in a forgotten sector of space, a team of explorers uncovered something ancient, a derelict station, floating in the void, seemingly untouched for centuries. Inside, they found a single room, its walls lined with old human technology, holographic maps, encrypted data, faded insignias of the old Earth alliances, and in the center, a single terminal, still active, still waiting. The explorers hesitated, their hands trembling as they activated it. A message played. Not a warning, not a threat, just a simple voice, human in tone, calm in its delivery. Do not follow us. The screen flickered, showing a final image, a map of the galaxy, marked with thousands of uncharted systems. And in the center, one red marker. The last known location of humanity. The explorers stared at it in horror, understanding the message clearly. They had not disappeared. They had not been destroyed. They had simply moved on. And somewhere, beyond the edge of known space, humanity was still building, growing, preparing. For what? No one knew. But one thing was clear. If the galaxy ever forgot what had happened, if any species ever tried to rise again, if war ever returned to the stars, humanity would return. And this time, there would be nothing left to save. Beyond the edge of the stars, for centuries, the galaxy whispered of humanity. They were ghosts, phantoms haunting the ruins of the old empires. Their war had reshaped the universe, not through conquest, but through absolute fear. No species had dared to rise again. No empire had claimed the throne. Because whenever ambition took root, it was crushed before it could grow. And somewhere, far beyond the edge of known space, humanity was still out there. Watching, waiting, building. The silent exodus. When the final war ended, when the last empire fell, humanity did something no one expected. They left. Not in small fleets, not in scattered warships, but in a great exodus. Entire planets, once human colonies, were abandoned overnight. Cities that had once been filled with life were left silent, their infrastructure intact, their systems still operational, but their people gone. No one saw them leave. No distress signals, no final messages. One day, they were there. The next, they were not. And no one knew where they had gone. The Dark Zone. For hundreds of years, the edge of the galaxy remained a mystery. Then, the first explorers found the barrier. A vast, impenetrable region of space, stretching beyond all known maps, consuming entire sectors where human colonies had once existed. Sensors failed upon approach. Scanners returned only static. Ships that ventured too close never returned. The few who survived spoke of ghost ships drifting in the void, dark structures orbiting dead stars, signals whispering in languages no longer spoken. The galaxy had once believed it was watching humanity. Now, it understood. Humanity had been watching it. The Sleeper Worlds. A Trivaxian scout ship, desperate for resources, drifted too far into the barrier's edge. It found a planet. A world that should not have existed. A dead sun orbiting a silent, blackened sphere. But beneath the planet's icy shell, there was something alive. The scout ship sent drones to investigate. They returned one image. A city. Massive. Silent. Waiting. Before the Trivaxians could study it further, their ship was seized, not by weapons, not by force, but by something unseen. Their systems shut down. Their engines failed. A single message appeared on every screen, written in their own language. This is not your place. Leave. The ship's crew, terrified beyond measure, turned back. They never spoke of what they had seen. Because they knew the truth. Humanity had not disappeared. They had simply moved somewhere else. And they were not alone. The Forbidden Sector. Deep within the uncharted void, past the barrier, was a region no one dared enter, a sector erased from all maps. The only name it was known by came from whispered legends: the Forge. It was not a single planet, not a single system. It was an empire, unseen. A vast, interconnected network of hidden cities, blackened worlds, and colossal shipyards orbiting dying stars. Humanity had not simply survived. They had evolved, the architects of the unknown. There was no government, no rulers, no council. Humanity had shed its past. There were no kings, no presidents, no emperors. Only the architects. A nameless, faceless force that guided them from the shadows, operating in absolute secrecy, ensuring that the old cycle would never begin again. For the first time in history, humanity had achieved what no empire ever could. True unity. They did not rule. They built. They did not conquer. They prepared. For what? No one knew. The armory of stars, beyond the forge, hidden in the depths of space, was something greater. A fleet. Not of warships, but of arks. Massive vessels, the size of moons, drifting in deep space, housing entire worlds within them. Each one a sanctuary, a self-sustaining ecosystem, designed to exist in the void for eternity. Some believed humanity had transcended, leaving the galaxy behind, setting out to explore the unknown reaches of the universe. Others believed they were simply waiting, watching the stars, ensuring that no new empire would rise. But the greatest fear, the darkest legend, was this. The ships were not for escape. They were for war. Humanity had not abandoned the galaxy. They had simply given it time. Time to recover. Time to learn. Time to prove that history would not repeat itself. But if the galaxy failed, if the old cycle began again, if war returned to the stars, the fleets would return. And this time, they would not leave anything behind. The final warning. 1,000 years had passed since the fall of the last empire. A single message appeared across the surviving networks, sent from an unknown source. It was a warning. Not a threat. Not a declaration. Just a simple truth. The cycle must never return. The message was transmitted in every language, to every remaining species, from a signal no one could trace. No one knew who sent it. No one responded. Because they knew what it meant. Humanity was still out there. Still watching. Still deciding. And the moment the galaxy forgot the lesson of its past, the war would begin again. And this time, there would be no survivors. The last image. Deep within the void, beyond the barrier, a probe sent by an unknown species captured a single, haunting image. A fleet, massive beyond comprehension. Dark ships, built from metals that reflected no light, moving through the void with impossible precision. At the center of it all, a single titanic vessel, a dreadnought unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. And along its side, written in the old human language, one phrase. A warning. A promise. A name the galaxy would never forget. We remember.